I'd like to take you now to Kfar, village, Nahum, comfort, Kfar Nahum, Capernaum, village of comfort. Okay? And my first book was on a harmony of the Gospels, and I was trying to calculate how many times Jesus did a miracle or preaching in Capernaum. It's so common, it's second only to Jerusalem. So, the second most active place, according to the Gospels, is Capernaum. And it's on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee, so we are now heading east along the north shore, and we're going to go to Capernaum. Now, here's what it's going to be like. We're going to step off the bus, take a walk into the site, and it's going to be kind of a nice flat walk. It's paved into the site, and then walk in and see parts of 6 insula-style buildings of a style different than what we saw for the 3-room cave-style home yesterday, and even a synagogue that comes from the late 4th century, early 5th century, the big white synagogue. We're going to take a look at those, but my primary focus is what do we know about what Jesus did in this town, and what was the town about? What we do know is that they discovered this synagogue from a later time, and initially they said the black line of the wall underneath it is the foundation of the synagogue. Well, that's ridiculous. It's flush on that end and 8 inches off on that end. Guys, these people do stone for a living, okay? They're not 8 inches off on the end of the project, okay? So, Father Corbeau said, you know what? There might be another synagogue underneath of that. Great thinking. And on the inside, on one side, he punched through the floor down into the previous synagogue and found that the black synagogue, the footprint of the white one, is a black synagogue that comes from the 1st century. You even know, if you looked at John 6 and Luke 7, you even know who built this synagogue. Who gave much money to this synagogue to build it? A centurion approached Jesus, and the servant was dying, needed healing, and the people of the synagogue turned to Jesus and said, help this man, for he's given much money for our synagogue to help us build it. So we know it's contemporary to the generation of Jesus. We know the money was partially from a pig-eating pagan who wanted to stand under the umbrella of the Jewish covenant, and so he gave much money for the synagogue. Does that make sense? Now, here's a bigger theme, and I want you to just unpack it in your own mind. I'll touch it. If you want to talk more about it, I will. You only know of certain healings in this town, but you know of 3 critical ones, and they are all for a purpose. In John chapter 4, verses 46 to 54, there's a long distance healing. Do you remember? In John 4, it says there was a basilicon. For your terminology, mayor. There's a mayor from Capernaum. And finds out that his son is lying at the point of death. It is late one night, and through the night he is agonizing because he's losing his son. Up in Cana, up near Nazareth yesterday. Can you picture that? Way up north. When we started going through all those villages trying to get up to Nazareth, Cana was at our back just nearby. Okay, it is. If I walk up this hill, it's a little over 8 hours hike up to Cana. It's a nice hike. I've never done it. I've done the down because I'm not an idiot. It's 5.5 down. Okay? I've done down the hill 5.5 hours, 8 hours plus up. The guy gets up in the morning, and in John 4, 46 to 54, the only detail you have is this. He goes to see Jesus. Jesus says, go home, your son is well. The next day, he's coming down the hill. The slaves meet him, and they say, Master, your child is well. When did it happen? Yesterday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he knew it was in that hour he met Jesus. You're supposed to know something. If the man walked from Capernaum up to Cana and met Jesus at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, roughly-ish, and he left that morning, as the text tells us, when did he leave in the morning to get there by 1 o'clock? I'm a Bible major, not a math major. Let's say before dawn. Okay, so he leaves before dawn. We all on that page? Would you, as a parent, leave before dawn to save the life of your son? This is a normal act of any loving parent. He walks all the way up there, but here's the thing. Jesus says, hey, your son is well. And he takes the rest of the day off and doesn't come down when he can be back by sundown. Why? Because he has faith. What is faith? Listen, God blesses. Faith is seeing it the way God says it is, not the way my eyes would see it if I never looked through his word. The minute I see it through God's word, I have a biblical worldview. And that man believed what Jesus said, and therefore he said, well, I can take the day off, do some antiquing here in 1999 here for all the rage. And why should I take off? I'm telling you, I'd have gotten up early in the morning and I'd have walked out that hill. I'm telling you, I'd have done that. But as soon as Jesus said he was well, I'd have been emailing, texting, running down smoke signals, jogging. I'd get back to find out if it happened. Why? Faith is believing what Jesus said, not needing to see. Okay? Now, why do I have that story? Well, it's a really cool long distance deal. Yeah, but now, the mayor of town owes Jesus. If you go to Luke 7, you end up with the centurion in town, the Roman official in town, owes Jesus. There's a story in Mark chapters 4 and 5. Jesus has been preaching. He goes away on a boat. He then runs into a demoniac. He comes back. He gets here, and Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, one of the leaders of the synagogue, probably the chazan, he's the guy with the key. He lives just behind here. Jesus is invited to his house because his daughter's lying at the point of death. Remember? He gets off and he's walking up this road, coming up to this house. And as he's going up to the house, a woman who cannot stop bleeding comes up behind him and grabs something. Now watch the Greek, because in the Greek, what she grabs, hemation, could be any part of the bottom of his garment. But we believe what she grabbed was his tassel. There are 4 tassels that hang on the outside of your garment. Numbers 15 says there should be a ribbon of blue in them because you're a royal people, a chosen people. But those 4 tassels are essentially your charge card. Go all the way back to 1700 BC in Mari, Syria. We find some tablets that went through a fire that became hard tablets. We call them the Mari tablets because they're from Mari. People bought supplies, and in them was pressed rope with little knots. And it was just the tassels they were wearing with 3 knots space, 2 knots space, 1 knot space, 5 knots pressed. Some of you remember that before we had magnetic strips, we used to have ka-chunk machines. You remember those? You put the NCR paper down, you put the credit card underneath, and you go ka-chunk. That was to do what the tassel was for. If you moved a tassel in your graduation, you attained authority. That's what we're doing. The tassels are looped, not tied onto the garment. But in the Mark's gospel, the woman came up and it said, the Greek text says, she grabbed and it kept on clinging. In other words, she pulled it off. Jesus, knowing authority, had gone out of him. It's not like a game where his battery pack just went down spiritually. Rather, somebody just lifted his Amex card. So he turns to the disciples and says, who's got my credit card? And they go, how in the world do we know? Why? Because I know where they are. They're ahead of Jesus. I think they're up there going, Jairus, we're with Jairus, we're tight, we're going to be here all week, you can come see us if you need anything. And I think the disciples are ahead of Jesus, the woman comes up behind. Now, who is this woman? She's a woman who can never make her children lunches and send them off to the school. She can't hug her husband, she can't sleep with her husband. She is perpetually unclean, and as far as she knows, God made her that way. She has spent everything she had on doctors and has nothing better, but rather grew worse. She's desperate, and she says, if I can just grab the symbol of his authority, I will be made well. I so believe that he has the power that if I can just touch him. But unfortunately it comes off in her hand. Now she's got his credit card. So he turns around, she's trembling, she walks up and goes, oops. And he says, daughter, your faith, see it the way I say it, your faith has made you whole. The belief that I am powerful over your sickness is what made you well. Why? Because it's true. And she's made well. Then he walks in, and the people who should be excited about his arrival start joking when he says, she's not dead, she's asleep. Oh, what are you kidding? They're mocking him, it says. And what goes in and he raises up Jairus' daughter, then says to him, give her something to eat, and walks out. Now, why do you know that healing? Lots of other people got it. But listen, the mayor owes him, the centurion owes him, and now the head of the synagogue, or one of the heads of the synagogue, owes him. In other words, Herod Antipas is in Tiberias with a rather big schnoz, if the statue is to be believed, and right under his nose, Jesus is operating, and nobody's telling him where Jesus is. He's looking for Jesus, but can't find him. Why? Because everybody owes Jesus. So you know about the people that owe Jesus that become the cover of Jesus. Does that make sense? Yeah, does that make sense? Good. All right, let's keep going.